There you go. All presentations will, and the recordings of these presentations and the slides will be made available later, not today, but very shortly. If you have any questions or technical problems, please send me a note directly in the chat. Everyone, please mute yourselves if you aren't so already. And remain muted unless you've been called upon to speak. At the end of the presentation, we actually changed that. We're going to be sending you an evaluation later today to get your feedback on today's conference. So look for that. Just a reminder, we're asking everyone to please put your name, your organization, and your email in the chat so that we can have the ability to send you an evaluation and also to track your attendance if you are a PWI grantee. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jason. I'll just introduce him quickly. Today he's going to be talking about the structure of self-help groups and how to make them more effective. Jason is the program director at SHARE, the Self-Help and Recovery Exchange. Jason serves on the board of directors for CAMHPRO and is the co-chair of the National Recovery Month Steering Committee. He has worked in nonprofit management for 17 years, focusing on peer services, education, recovery, housing, and health. He is my boss. And without further ado, Jason, to you.
Hi, Lenny. Thank you. Good to see everybody. And maybe, Lenny, you can mute everybody. I think we have people that are not aware they're unmuted. So really good to see everybody. So glad you're here. And thanks for one, attending the conference, two, contributing to the conference, three, doing the phenomenal work that you do with our community in all your expertise, and also for being part of the webinar itself. We wanted to make this process easier on your time because we have webinars, we have conferences, and we have learning collaboratives. And so where there's a month where we're going to have a learning collaborative and a webinar, or a conference and a webinar, we wanted to find a way to kind of structure it in a way so that we could make our time more effective. So this webinar, this counts as a webinar, and you're participating in the conference. So the webinar, we are going to focus on the structure of self-help support groups. This conference is bringing a lot of research about peer practices, recovery, and recovery across a broad spectrum of definition, and self-help support groups. So I'm going to talk about self-help support groups. I want to let you know right off the bat that the PowerPoint that I have a lot of information on a few slides because I wanted to spend a lot of our time talking and interacting rather than just reading slides. So, so as we move forward, I'm gonna share the slides, we'll get some information, and then we'll come back and have a little conversation and I'll talk about it. Okay, so let me share my screen. And as questions come up, we will have time for questions at the end. And if you have questions in the course of the webinar, please put them in the chat. Lenny will be monitoring that. So here we go. Okay, the structure of self-help support groups. I'm going to start with a question. And when you have the answer to the question, you can just put your you can raise your hand, or you can, the answer to the question is a number. So when you know the number, put your hand up with the amount of whatever the number is, use your fingers. So the question is, how many paid staff does it take to run a self-help support group? What do people think? How many paid staff does it? 0. I see right there. Kathy Cordova has 0. Okay. And William, is that what you were going to say? I saw you had your hand up. Okay. Self-help support groups don't need paid staff to run them. Self-help support groups are run by people in those groups. They run themselves, and we create that distinction for very important reasons, because the groups that operate, that are led by staff, have a different structure and have different outcomes than self-help support groups where the participants in the group run the meeting themselves. So let's talk about this really quickly. And to do that, I'm going to come back to my screen here, so bear with me. So self-help support groups run themselves. The answer is 0. So in a brief definition, I'm gonna kind of go over kind of toward a definition of a self-help support group. And in this context, this is the definition. This is not the only definition. We came up, decades ago with a definition here that served for us to support new meetings in starting a self-help support group at one of our recovery centers, and to include in our database that we provide for LA County, where we track over 12,000 self-help support groups that deal with over 750 different life issues. So I am going to, let's see, to make this, I'm gonna ask people to read this. And Lenny, do people have the ability to unmute themselves, or do you have to do something for that?
No, I believe they do.
They have the power. Okay. So I am, if you don't mind,
If you don't, let me know.
Call people as they appear on my screen so that we get right into participation. So the first hallmark of a self-help support group, number 1, Akil, could you read that for us?
Sure. Give me 1 second. I'm just moving the screen. The group's purpose is to pursue personal growth and change. The support group must include a desire to change. For example, a bar is a support group for alcoholics, but there is no intent to change.
Thank you. Okay. Number 2, let's see, Chris D. Can you read that for us?
Yeah. Chris the alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic, sorry. Number 2, everyone in the group is a peer. When we go to a meeting where everyone is on the same level, negativity and shame fall away.
Great, thank you. Number 3, Raquel.
There is sharing and/or interaction between members.
Thank you. And let's see, I've got to scroll down. Let's see, number 4, I don't know. Dr. Michael J. Palou, are you there? And if not, I'm going to go to Teresa H. Number 4.
Hi. Decisions about the group are made by the group. Maximum benefits are achieved when group acts independently from outside organizations, such as deciding when and where to hold a meeting.
Thank you. Number 5, Anna. Anna, there we go.
Leadership roles available to all group members. Group leadership is non-professional.
Thank you. Jason, number 6. You're muted, sorry.
Any Jason? There's a few here.
That's, yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Here we go.
We're on 5?
You're on 6.
6, I mean. Okay. Any member could potentially lead the group. Each member of the group could become a leader with minimal training.
Great, thank you. And let's see. Number 8, Deanna, French.
8, each member of the group has a right to due process in disputes with the group.
Great, thank you. And number 9, James K.
No financial barriers, dues, and fees are nominal, reflecting group expenses, self-help support groups.
Sorry, that last one is just a dangler. So yeah, dues and fees are nominal, reflecting group expenses. Thank you, everybody. So in a self-help support group, I'm going to kind of talk about these one by one now and get into a little bit more detail. So when we think about a purpose being to pursue group personal growth and change, let me stop sharing for just a second. Do people have some examples from self-help support groups that they might go to where that is really clear? There's a clear purpose that involves personal growth and change, and people can raise their hands. I see Amanda with a hand up. You can unmute yourself.
Al-Anon and ACA.
Great. And what would the goal, the personal change be in those groups? For an example.
Sobriety and personal and spiritual growth.
Okay. Excellent. And I see Akil and then Sinetta.
Sure. Recovery International.
Okay, great. And what would be the personal growth and change in Recovery International?
I would say it's to better navigate the understanding that your mental health is not a game, but a business.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you, Akil. Sinetta.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, AA. It helps me to stay sober, and it really is teaching me a lot about myself and how to navigate this world without a drink or a drug.
That's great.
And helping others as well.
Okay. And let's see, Deanna Allen 44 @gmail.com.
Sorry, I didn't want to do all the other things.
It's all right.
Complex PTSD support group. And the reason why is the other things that I sought self-help for were but symptoms. And this one reminds me that self-care and self-compassion are super important to maintain freedom from all the other symptoms. But it also, helps me to keep the inner critic voice quiet by other people who are understanding and compassionate toward what we go through every day.
Right. Great. Adrian.
Thank you for calling me. Yes, we have a self-help group. It's called CGA. I don't know if you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And that group there is very useful, in the terms of, the areas where you're at, because I'm in LA, so, a lot of stuff goes on out this way, but those help out so much, you know what I mean? Because you look forward to seeing the next your peers there and whoever is being invited to that, you know what I mean, to that group. And to me, well, for me, it's very useful, is what I'm trying to say. It's very useful.
Great,
Very
thank
useful.
you. And I'm going to do one more, Crystal, and then we can move on.
Hi, so my support group I go to is called Sierra Native Alliance, and it deals with not only sobriety, but well-briety, having balance in your life, spiritually and physically and mentally, all together.
Great, thank you. So as an overview, and I really appreciate everybody sharing, and I think there are a couple comments in the chat. So Parents Anonymous groups, family support groups have been mentioned. So CODA has been mentioned, which is Codependence Anonymous, which is building relationships. This first point, right, that a self-help support group has to involve a process of personal growth and change. It functions to create cohesiveness and consistency. So there's a consistency of people attending, and there's a clarity for everybody that does attend about exactly why they are attending this group. There's a stated purpose. That's really important. That makes it, and as we interact with people in a peer context, as we connect them to communities of people where they share that same desire for personal growth. Like they might have a desire in a specific area of their life. It could be something like CODA. It could be Parents Anonymous. It could be a diabetes support group. My desire is going to be to control my diabetes, right? When I'm with people that share that same desire, I'm around a supportive community and it creates consistency. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen really quickly, and we're going to look at the next one. Everybody in the group is a peer, okay? And when we go to the meeting, everybody's on the same level. So this is one of the distinct features of self-help support groups, in that peerness is in many ways at its most authentic in a self-help support group. Think back to the original question: how many paid staff does it take to run a self-help support group? 0. So in a self-help support group, everybody is a peer at the same level. In a peer-run group that's started by an agency, we all might have the same lived experience, but our peerness still exists within a hierarchy when we're in an environment where an agency or a staff has created and is running a meeting. In a self-help support group, everybody there is at the same level of peerness, which is really important in terms of creating a sense of empowerment. So next, number 3, when we look at number 3, there's sharing and interaction between members. And one of the questions that we often get at Share is, well, you know, if the staff don't lead the group, who leads the group? And we'll get to this a little bit later in another webinar, but the leader of the group is actually a written format. Okay, a self-help support group can have a written format that is developed by the members of the group that walks people through the process of the group having a group. And within that context, built into that format is space for sharing and interaction between members. And interaction between members is defined often in that format. Can anybody think of one of the rules in a self-help support group that is not allowed? Like, so let me address this really. This is a great distinction because in a 12-step program, interaction is defined specifically, and there's something called no crosstalk. In Recovery International, the sharing is designed in a much different context, and it's designed around spotting the spots, and Akil referred to one of them. My mental health is a business, not a game, right? So sharing in Recovery International is an opportunity for people to practice those spots in a structured way of speaking so that they develop a competence and a practice of using those spots in what Recovery International would call daily trivialities. So it's a practice format for how to use the spots. When people share in a 12-step meeting, there's something called no crosstalk. Can anybody speak to what that means? And you can just hold up your hand. Yes, I see real Kathy Cordova.
So each person shares without somebody else commenting on them. And in fact, it's like each thing is separate, right?
Right. Yeah. So I don't give suggestions on somebody else's comment, right? Somebody says something, they share, and when it's my turn to share, my sharing isn't about what they shared, it's my own experience. Having said that, when we talk about interaction, there are different ways of interacting within a self-help support group. There are roles. We'll talk in a second about leadership opportunities, right? That's a way of interacting. Think of think of somebody that comes to a self-help support group, and the first couple weeks they're the new person. And then the fourth week they're there, somebody asks them if they can make the coffee. And now they're the coffee person. And they're interacting with everybody in this role of kind of being of service, doing something for everybody. Adrian, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that cross-talking.
Yeah.
I know for us, it was like, while somebody's sharing, you don't interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You let the person share, and like the lady said a few minutes ago too, you don't comment on what they're sharing about, you know, and because that's really important, because you're whoever's sharing, it could be something very private or something that's going on in their life that they need to get it out, you know, so there should be no interruptions.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much. And the interaction that comes into relationships in self-help support groups often moves beyond the meeting itself, right? So there's interaction in that people, when they go to self-help support groups, are often, you know, there's this thing called fellowship where people will have relationships. They'll go to for coffee, they'll go to food before or after a meeting. They'll support each other outside of the meeting. That's all interaction. And it's interaction with people from a broad community, right? I might go to a clinic for a number of issues. And when my social network broadens to people in the entire community rather than just the other people at that clinic, I get more support. So that kind of interaction is important. So next we talk about decisions about the group are made by the group. Maximum benefits are achieved when group acts independently from outside organizations. And I'll tell you, as each of your organizations may look to build in intentionally connections with referring people to self-help support groups, how to incorporate self-help support groups into what you're doing, this can get complicated. When we first started Share, we used to we called this getting traditioned. We would try and communicate with the 12-step self-help support groups, and some person in that group would say that they're not affiliated with other organizations. So there's a specific way of interacting with self-help support groups that maximizes our ability to connect people to them, and a way of getting them into our communities so that they see, you know, we're not inside their meetings, they get to do their meetings, they make their decisions, they come up with their format. All of that stuff is governed by them, and we are just like a space where they can have their meeting. Okay, and they make the decisions, we don't make the decisions about what happens in the group. Next, let me go back to sharing, sorry. Okay, leadership roles are available to all group members, and group leadership is non-professional. I'm gonna go back to this really quickly. I'm gonna go back to the group. How does leadership happen in the self-help support groups that people have experience with here in this webinar? I'll take let's do 4 comments, and hopefully by people who haven't yet commented. You can do.
People get picked at the beginning of, people get picked at the beginning of the meeting?
People get picked at the beginning of the meeting. So what kind of things do they get picked for?
Reading.
They'll read some recovery literature in the meeting. Great. So they can be, and who picks them?
The secretary of the meeting.
The secretary of the meeting. Is that a permanent position?
No.
No? How do people become the secretary of the meeting?
They're elected.
Or volunteer. They volunteer.
They
many times.
volunteer. They were elected. is there any specific requirement for, like, do
In
they need a
some cases,
resume to
yeah.
apply?
No.
No. All right.
Sometimes.
So,
Sometimes.
For some positions, there's a minimum clean time requirement.
Exactly.
right. And that's usually to handle money. So, and particularly that's in the groups that deal with substance use. So the group can make sure the person's not, likely to be triggered and get a bunch of cash and go spend it. So those are ways of groups finding ways for people to be leaders and finding ways to keep a consistent practice of how the group operates. So thank you, and great examples. Let me go back here to our screen. All right, so now it's important to know while there's little training involved, like it could be different. Like DBSA is going to have a specific structure for how DBSA develops participants in DBSA in doing a DBSA meeting. Recovery International is going to have a specific process about how they, prepare somebody to lead a Recovery International meeting. And those are typically a little bit more structured than a 12-step program in how they are going to, just pick somebody who goes because there's a need and they throw them in and they get that experience. It's a little bit different, but it's still very open and anybody can become a leader. So when we talk about no financial barriers, the same kinds of similarities and slight differences apply, right? So, and it's dependent on kind of what's happening in the group. So in a 12-step meeting, it's usually people are passing a basket. There's a recommended, contribution, like $1 or $2, depending on the meeting. And people don't have to put $1 in every time they're in a meeting. If they do, and they often do, and they go into a couple meetings a week, that, that builds up. Other meetings structure that financial participation differently, and it could be for needs. So often a self-help support group that deals with a health issue will have a higher cost for literature because the literature is based in, an academic press or something like that. So they'll need to buy a bunch of literature up front, and they'll require people to pay $50 a year up front. That doesn't mean that if somebody can't afford that, they don't work things out, but it's a different structure. And just because they've got a different structure doesn't mean they're operating the same way and that, the dues and fees are nominal. When we want to make sure that dues and fees reflect the needs of the self-help support group. And I say this often and also because, in creating a recovery community that is grounded in the participation of community-based self-help support groups, your experience may be similar to ours in that you may have lots of people come to you as people came to us and say, yep, I want to start a group here. You've got great rooms and I'm going to start a group. And well, that group is really, an accountant trying to do their tax practice in our space. And that's not a self-help support group. So we had to figure out a context for how we're going to use our meeting space and what that is. And this helps us do that. So, and I'm noticing there's a bunch of chats. So Lenny, if there are any particular questions.
Yeah, Wynette threw out that that in her 12-step groups that they don't throw people into positions. There's some sort of qualification that takes place. William added that for secretary and treasurer, frequently there's a length of sobriety or clean time that's required.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And there are different levels of commitment, right? So there are in a 12-step meeting, there's There's leadership available at the meeting level. There's leadership available at the group level too. So beyond the meeting, there might be an area where somebody is, there's world service. There are things like that that people can experience leadership in and be connected to an even broader community. And within the meeting, while there's leadership like a secretary and a treasurer, there's also literature, there's cleanup, there's the cigarette butt cleaner upper. There's some meetings will find a way to create what's called a commitment or a position of leadership so that they keep the newest person connected and they give them a role of leadership. Because does it feel better to be a newcomer or to be a leader? A leader, I see Barbara mouthing, yeah. So when we find opportunities for people to really participate in the functioning of the meeting, rather than just being a sponge as a newcomer, it connects them better to the meeting. So as meetings are interacting with you and using your space, seeing those possibilities and speaking to those possibilities as people with personal experience in self-help support groups really helps us build in for self-help support groups those practices where people get the best outcomes. Let me go back to my screen really quick. Go ahead.
Mason, who I believe is with the Sacramento Youth Center, asked, can you talk about how this might work with youth under 18?
Yes, I can. So, and that's a great, youth under 18, and for example, lots of self-help support groups. Rainbows is a self-help support group that is focused on any child that has experienced trauma can go to Rainbows. There aren't as many Rainbows meetings in California, but hopefully we can try and change that with this project. In Florida, for example, every child that goes through a divorce is referred to a Rainbows meeting, okay? And they have different kinds of Rainbows meetings. So some are secular and some are non-secular based on the family structure of that child. And those meetings work because there is an adult who qualifies as a peer because they had that issue as a child, but they can serve as the container to make sure that the structure works in a peer-to-peer way. So the adult that identifies as having had that issue as a child can be in that group and let that group experience itself as a self-help support group. Is that clear, Mason? Wherever you are? Yeah, good. If there are other questions around that, happy to answer. Okay, so back to the presentation. All right, so now looks at within that structure, what's happening that makes self-help support groups even more effective? What's going on? So, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to just scroll down a little bit to give, I'm going to start calling on, I think, people that haven't shared, and we'll go over these in the same kind of way. And then we'll talk about it. So let's see, who would like to read number one? I see Dr. Michael J. Palou is back. Michael, Dr. Palou, could you read the first number one?
Speaking in terms of setting up groups or group coming out of like the young people 18 years of age.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm just asking, we're on the slide, what makes self-help support groups even more effective? Are you able to see this, the screen, the slides?
So I'm now learning all this. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to just get people participating. So could you read for us number one?
What makes self-help support group effective?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, just read number one.
Oh, okay, okay. Yes. What makes self-help support group effective?
All right, yeah.
And then number one, I got share. Oh boy, I just have his new glasses there. Share the emotion of what they want to achieve.
Thank you. And I can totally relate to the glasses issue. Thank you. I had to go back and get my glasses out of the car.
I have to go back tomorrow.
So thank you. Yeah. The first thing is a shared understanding of what people in the group want to achieve. Everybody's there to achieve a similar thing. Let me go to Paulette Bowling, number 2. Could you read that for us?
Tools to help people pursue personal growth and change.
Okay, self-help support groups are even more effective when there are specific tools that support that personal growth and change. Sunny, could you please read?
Hey, Jason, real quick. Mason had a follow-up question,
Okay.
which was, how do we establish them, meaning young people, as leaders to ensure they have a voice in the process of the group?
With the format. The format we designed specifically to encourage participation, to encourage that time for sharing, to encourage roles for leadership so that people can step into that. Good question.
One other note, there's a note that some people may have reading disabilities that being called out might be uncomfortable. Just that was put in, that was private message to me. So if you're uncomfortable, you're welcome to pass. If you're uncomfortable for any reason, you can just not respond, or you can say pass, or it's absolutely voluntary participation.
Yeah, and I'll make it all voluntary. That way nobody's put in the position where they have to say pass. So I'll just ask for hands, and I'm trying to get as much participation as possible so that we can have lots of people contribute if they want to. So number 3, can somebody raise their hand who hasn't yet shared?
Number 3, ability to incorporate new learning into the meeting/fellowship.
Right. That's really critical. We call this founder syndrome, because if they don't change and grow, they can just die out. And thank you all for your hands. So let me see. That was Pam. So number 4 now. Let me do Coretta.
Written format explaining how the meeting will proceed that gives people an opportunity to read literature.
Excellent. Thank you. And then John, number 5.
A statement at the beginning of the meeting that breaks the ice on difficult topics that members may want to talk about.
Excellent. Thank you. And let's see, Gwen, number 6.
Many service positions.
Right. Opportunities to be part of the meeting. And I'm going to say Bethany, number 7.
Timing shares so that everyone has a chance to share.
Right. I'll talk more about this in a second. And number 8, Levi.
Having no crosstalk policy where people cannot give advice or comment on another person's share during the meeting.
Great. If you didn't share, keep your hands up, because there will be another opportunity, and I'll just keep going down the list. So thank you. A couple things about these. So incorporating new learning into the meeting and the fellowship. So even an old established group like a 12-step meeting like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? AA did a census of itself in the 1980s. And one of the things that they found was that people were fighting over what version of the Lord's Prayer to use in the meeting. And it was causing people to leave meetings and meetings to disintegrate. So AA World Service made a recommendation that people use the Serenity Prayer instead. Now, meetings are autonomous, they run themselves, so lots of meetings still use the Lord's Prayer, and many meetings use the Serenity Prayer. So that's incorporating new meetings or new learning into the fellowship. The written format is really helpful, and we will share something with all of you called the structure of self-help support groups, where it gives you a kind of step-by-step guide if people want to start a self-help support group of how to create a written format. A statement at the beginning of the meeting that breaks the ice on difficult topics that they may want to talk about. Can anybody give an example of how this works in a meeting they might have attended? I'm gonna stop sharing really quick. Like the readings that happen in the self-help support group. And if you, because people already have their hands up to share in already, if you have something to add to this, you can just physically put your hand up. Okay, Deanna Allen 44 Gmail.
If I understand the question correctly, even like when I think of the Serenity Prayer, I think of the original full version by Reinhard Bonnke.
Yeah.
And so even to determine the Serenity Prayer, is it the shortened, more widely acceptable, or is it the full version? So.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So, and in terms of like an ice-breaking statement, so I'll give an example that I love. And one of the fellowships that I attend is Cocaine Anonymous. And Cocaine Anonymous has a piece of literature that is not used in every meeting, but some meetings use it. It's called Who is a Cocaine Addict? Right? And so, and that piece of literature breaks down every shameful thing that could come up. Like it talks about people experiencing, it talks about people from all walks of life, right? It could be anybody. And it talks about all of the shameful things that might happen. It talks about issues with marriages, with families, with sex, with employment, with housing, all of that. So people are able to kind of have a new relationship with those issues and detach themselves from the shame of those things. Because if I'm new to that meeting and I hear that being read and I see people relating and I hear people laughing about that, it totally changes my understanding of how those things are talked about in this context, right? So that's a really important, that icebreaker thing is really important. And identifying the tools in the meeting is really important too. One of the things that is important with timing, so that everybody has a chance to share, meetings that have a little bit longer time period, like a lot of meetings will have 3 minutes as, okay, now we allow sharing for 3 minutes. A lot of times people will just, the first 2 minutes of somebody's share might just be like, blah, like, well, I'm having a good day today and blah, blah, blah. They don't get to really what's going on until a couple minutes. It takes them a couple minutes to get down there. So if the meeting has space, right? If it's not a meeting of 50 people, if it's a meeting of 10 or 15 or 20 people, allowing for more time to share is going to allow people to get to that deeper level of intimacy and talk about what's really going on. And those things are really important. All right, let me get back to the meeting here. And we will have time for questions at the end really quick. So let me do. Okay. All right, so let me go to the next slide and talk about mechanisms of change that help, that work in a meeting, okay? So, and that way I'm gonna go back to the people that had their hand up. So I see, oh, I've really messed up now, sorry about that. Okay, so mechanisms of change, things in a self-help support group that support change and growth. And this is just in the order that's listed on my screen. So sorry if we went out of order. Dave B, number 1.
Yeah. Number 1, provide support.
Provide support. Great. And number 2, Dwight Radcliffe.
Number 2, mirroring.
Mirroring, thank you. Number 3, EHR.
Helper therapy principle.
Helper therapy principle, thank you. Number 4, Sunny.
Removes defensiveness.
Removes defensiveness. Number 5, Tina.
Removes excuses.
Removes excuses. Great, thank you. Number 6, Ashley.
Gives us perspective and or healthy competition.
Great, thank you. Perspective and healthy competition. Number 7, Leslie.
Personal responsibility for problems.
Excellent, thank you. Number 8, Tracy. No, yeah, Tracy.
No unsolicited advice to others.
No unsolicited advice. And thank you. And number 9, and I think I went over you, Eric.
Number 9, intimacy.
Intimacy. Great. Okay, so let me kind of just go into these a little bit, and then we'll have time for questions and all of that. So in terms of providing support, the meeting functions almost exclusively as an opportunity for personal growth and change through support. All right. And in one of the earlier sessions, there was a discussion about the only requirement for membership, right? The only, in a 12-step meeting, can somebody raise their hand? Let me do this really quick. I'm gonna stop sharing. In a 12-step meeting, what's the only requirement for membership? Amanda.
The only requirement for membership is either that you have a personal problem with a substance or that you are a friend or family of somebody who has a problem with a substance.
Right. And that it's a desire, right? It's not success. I don't have to have, recovered completely from this issue. Whatever the group is, it's a desire. Okay. And everybody in that group supports progress toward that goal. So there's support toward my successes, and there's support in my failure. Because often as life, I am at least as, if I'm batting 500 in the stuff that I want to do, that's great. Baseball players who bat 500 are in the Hall of Fame, right? If I'm successful half of the time with the change I need to make, that's really successful. Most time, I'm going to try to change something and I'm not going to be successful. And in a self-help support group, that effort is consistently and constantly supported, right? There's that keep coming back kind of perspective. So support is essential. Mirroring. So in mirroring, I see myself and I see often aspects of myself that I can't see through seeing other people that have the same issue. Okay, I see my successes and my weaknesses in that kind of relationship where people are talking and I might be in a situation where I have never looked at whether or not I do something and I see it in somebody else that allows me to see it in myself. Still in a supportive context. That's what we mean by mirroring. The helper therapy principle, this is where, and this is we included this in the first learning collaborative as one of the evidence-based practices of peer support. This is where when there's a mentor-mentee relationship, the person that gets the greatest benefit is the person that's helping the other person. So in self-help support groups, where there's that structure that everybody gets to participate and everybody gets to be a leader at the same kind of peer level, that really emphasizes the helper therapy principle. People get to be a leader very quickly. They get to help somebody else. People with, who've been to a meeting 2 or 3 times are helpful to the person who's there for their first meeting. All right, that's really critical. Defensiveness and excuses. When let me stop sharing this for just a second. And I'm going to come back really quickly to disclosing, right? I say this often because this is a really important thing. So as people with lived experience, when we involve disclosing in this, and to look at how disclosing works and how disclosing works in a self-help support group to create a sense of support and to remove defensiveness. You think about the person that goes to a self-help support group for the first time, okay? And for our referral service, we did a census of our referral service, and 40% of people, over 40%, sorry, of people going to a self-help support group for the first time were going about an issue they had never shared with another human being, okay? So totally in isolation, totally can't talk about this, not happening, a lot of defensiveness, a lot of shame, a lot of fear. Think about what happens when that person gets to their first self-help support group. So they're going to walk into a room and they're probably going to sit at the back of the room. And within a minute of their being in that meeting, there's, somebody's going to open a binder and they're going to say something like, "Hi, my name's Jason. I'm and fill in the blank. I'm a sex addict. I'm a gambler. I'm an alcoholic. I'm codependent," whatever it is. And the next statement is usually something like, "Are there any others present?" And at that point, once whoever's reading the format says, "Are there any others present?" what does everybody else in the meeting do? They raise their hand, okay? So within a minute of the meeting starting, the person that's never shared that they have this issue sees that they're in a room full of people who totally identify as having this issue. And then people start talking. They might do a reading, they start sharing. And as they're sharing about things that nobody who doesn't live with that issue can relate through narrative, right? So the new person's going, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was the only person doing that. That person did that, I did that," right? There's this immediate sense of relatedness, and there's also hope because the person sees that people are talking about it in a totally different way, and the person sees that there's tools. So that experience is often transformative for people. And so it's critical that we're able to make sure that people experience that by connecting them to the groups that have these kinds of structures within them. So, and one of the ways that we often talk about how self-help support groups work in this way with agencies that start groups that aren't self-help support groups, or that emphasize the work of professionals and clinicians, which is also important and has its place. We'll talk about, a case manager or a nurse can describe how to attach and use a colostomy bag, right? If somebody has a health issue and they need to use a colostomy bag, a clinician, a nurse, okay, this is how you attach it. This is the valve. You do this, you do that. This is how you empty it, okay? But only somebody that lives with a colostomy bag can talk about the issues that come up when you have sex and have a colostomy bag, okay? And it's really, somebody with a colostomy bag is likely going to run into that experience. They're going to need to know, and they're going to need to know with somebody who's had that experience. And that's the way that support works differently. So Let me get back to our screen really quick. I'm sure there are questions and there are comments. I will, it is 1:26, so we've got, I'm gonna wrap up here really quickly. And I wanna say that the elements of change in self-help support groups and the structures for change in self-help support groups are identified, they're replicable, meaning that we can work with people that have issues to build in these functions so that they're able to support each other as a community and act autonomously in a way where they experience leadership, support, and a sense of purpose. And 40% of whether people are okay or not okay is directly related to the amount and quality of social support that people have. All self-help support groups provide social support and strengthen organic community-based social supports, which is really important, and that's what we want to be doing. And I'll say also that that sense of support, you know, we talked earlier on about the sharing and interaction between members in the group. Like when you think of, you know, how do people get jobs in this society? And you can just answer your hands. What are some ways that people get jobs? Throw your hands up. Okay, Sonetta.
This is so weird. I was just thinking how I got this job and another one offered to me. I mean, we apply or we do it by word of mouth. We asked a friend, and just being out there, letting people know that you either need a job or something like that. So, I got called and they said, hey, why don't you come and apply? Please come do this interview.
Yeah,
type of thing.
All of that. Good. Gwen, what did you want to say?
I agree with Sonetta, word of mouth or going out and applying for jobs or getting with organizations that are, that's what they do for a living, is they, partner with employers. But as an employer, I like when I'm out and about in the community and I see people who have the characteristics of what I'm looking for, I reach out to them. I like to reach out to people and I look for those things in people for different situations too. So
active recruiting.
Yeah,
that's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dwight.
Yes, I'll have to say word of mouth, internet. How I got into mental health was through a family member that went to school, and this is where I'm at today.
Yeah, excellent. So the things that you're, and Michelle, go ahead.
I wanted to mention I'm finding a new way to where I work at the Mental Wellness Center in Santa Barbara. They have an employment specialist. They have, and then also the organizations I heard one other lady speak on as another way, like Department of Rehabilitation, and then they support the employment specialists over at the, or refer to the employment special over at the Mental Wellness Center. So that's how I got connected to the job that I'm in now.
Right, that's great. And a couple of the things that have come up consistently in answering that question are like word of mouth and things like that. And I want to point out that, in this society, in this culture, one of the major ways that people get jobs is by knowing people that know people who are hiring. Networking is one of the best ways to get a job, right? But if you don't have a network, if you don't have a social network, your knowledge of where to go for a job is smaller and smaller and smaller. And one of the things that self-help support groups do with employment and everything else, by expanding that network, people often get jobs through self-help support groups because they know somebody that knows somebody that's hiring, and that person that's hiring is doing active recruiting like Gwen. They would much rather hire somebody that knows somebody that they know from their fellowship than put in ads on Craigslist and have to review, 200 applications. So, and that works for, things that come up in our lives as we're connected to this community of support. That support starts to extend, right? So as issues come up on that job, I've got people to talk about those issues with. As physical health issues come up, I've got a network of people who lived through those issues and can refer me to people who lived with those issues. And I want to make sure I get Adrian and Phil.
Real quick, I have a quick, so it is 1:30, but we have a grace period because the next session doesn't start until 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you could probably keep going for another 20 minutes. It's entirely up to you. There was a question in the chat a few minutes ago that I just wanted to bring up. Anastasia asked, I'd love to know where that number comes from, referring to the people being okay in connection to the social support statistic.
Right. It was the most recent place that we got it was the director of mental health in Los Angeles County. So, and it's a well-identified social determinant of health. So, but we will cite it for you and we'll send that to you. Thank you. And I'm just so that people know, my plan is to just go until 1:45 and then give people 15 minutes to, debrief and get to their next presentation. If people want to leave earlier, that's totally fine. And also, let's get back to Adrian and then Phil.
Yes, you say you got a job. When I got in this field, I'm an alumni, and they seen the motivation that I have with clients and stuff like that, and how I used to share and bring up topics that really that are valid. I mean, solid valid, you know what I mean, in terms of helping another brother man, or woman or sister, or however and so, and before becoming a peer counselor at Competidor, I just knew the recovery end of it, and then now I'm learning and educating myself. It has given me a great sense of value in addition to learning more about having my own place where I get training and support, you see. And so, and I've been blessed, I've been lucky, but this is where I wanted to keep my feet grounded. And I can't ask for nothing better, and I love this job.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrian. Phil and then Antonia.
Yeah, thank you. Some excellent discussion and topics that we're covering. And you ask about networks. And part of my life has been in sales and sales management at the senior executive level. And one of the things that I always encouraged is not who you know or what you know, it's what you know about who you know. And that gave birth to these social websites like LinkedIn, where everybody says, here's me. And people are looking for not only acceptance based upon character, because their reputation is what people think they are, and that's John Wooden, the infamous basketball coach. But your character is who you are, and it's all based on trust.
Yeah.
So do you trust a person that's called a salesperson?
Right.
Or do you trust a trusted advisor.
Yeah, trusted advisor. Thank you, Phil. That's great. And that kind of trust develops very quickly in self-help support groups where everybody is up here at the same level. Nobody's paid to be there or do any of that. And everybody shares freely about their own experience. And and then that creates a greater accessibility to the process of how one experiences recovery, because I may see people out in the world from my meetings, and I know and then that's what I know about them. So I know they're there, right? I know they're out in the world. And if I'm, if I'm going through something, I'm out in the world and I see somebody, I can connect. And that's a really helpful kind of experience. Thank you. Antonia and then Sarah.
One of the things that I've gotten is I've been a part of Parents Anonymous 15 years in group, and I volunteered about 10 years. And in doing so, I learned so much about myself that I was able to grow and change my life, not only for myself, but for my 7 children and my niece, and I learned that I was in a safe place where I could open up and share about my childhood experiences, whether it was the molestation, the rape, the kidnapping, the domestic violence, the drug abuse. I was in a safe place to process all of these things and find my personal growth and make a change. And I learned that I was such a resilient person that I'd never seen or thought that I could be. And I decided, after being asked multiple times to join and become part of Parents Anonymous, that I was able to do that. I didn't think I could do anything. I thought I was so shattered that I was incapable of being anything other than just a provider for my children, and as I grew in the groups and my peers and my surroundings and the community, I became such a large advocate for parents, children, and youth that my children are very active in doing that as well. So I know that when you're in an environment where there's no judgment, no sexism, classism, or racism, and you can be the true you, the growth is amazing, and I've shared in one of the other groups, as of January 16th, I celebrated 16 years in recovery. And I don't think that I could have done that had I not gotten the support that I got from not only the facilitators, but my peers. And I am very grateful, and I will be screaming from the rooftops no matter where I'm at. And I've done it in a bathroom stall, supporting those around us, whether it's because of our children or because of ourselves, to let them know that there is light at the end. There is a bright future. And sometimes it's longer for some than it is for others, but letting them know that it is possible. And someone that has endured such heartache my entire life from the age of 4, that it's possible. And we just need that kind of support and someone alongside us, not pushing us, not dragging us, but walking with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonia. And I just want to point out that that support also gives us that language and that ability to connect with ourselves at this deeper level, right? So that now 16 years in, you're able to share, in a way about these very intimate experiences in a way that brings people in, that allows people to do that. And that is, a result of that, the way that sharing was developed through the process of support and being part of a community that allowed for that. And we're able to see ourselves as a full human being rather than just as the problem, right? When I have a community of support, I am no longer the problem that brought me into that self-help support group. I'm a full human being able to talk about that issue as part of myself as a much broader member of the world. Thank you. And Sarah.
Thanks. Thank you, first of all, for the presentation and the quality of the discussion. My question is about, it would seem to me that the effectiveness and the quality of a particular self-help support group would depend on the quality of the, I don't have the term right, but like the script, like the script that runs the meetings. And so how is new learning incorporated into the, into various kinds of self-help support groups that kind of adhere to the model that you're laying out here? Like, and sort of what are the, what, if anything, do we know about the varying effectiveness, kind of like, yeah, and for whom? Like, for whom are these kinds of things most effective?
Yeah, so we'll get to more of this in terms of, because so self-help support groups are most likely to be effective for an individual when that individual experiences the greatest sense of support, right? So when there's a connectedness with the worldview, like Bill W., the founder of AA, once said, all you need to start a new meeting is a resentment and a coffee pot, right? So back in the 1930s, there was AA and that was it. But all kinds of people had all kinds of resentments and they started new meetings. And those new meetings incorporating some of the structure of AA have been able to build support networks where it can be a different set of tools. It can be a different way of looking at the world. The support is still there. And the elements that we talked about in terms of the structure, in terms of the mechanism of change, are still involved. And so one of the ways to build that in, if somebody wants to start a group, right, and they, well, I don't know where to start, one of the things that we'll do, and lots of people will want to start a new group, right? I'm going to start something that's going to address this, right? And we try to take that enthusiasm and not smash it and say, great, in a self-help support group, here's how this is talked about. If you attend some of these meetings that already exist and may be similar in the content that you're looking at, you'll have an understanding of how it's discussed, because that person that has that enthusiasm to start a new group, often they want to be the leader, right? But if they're the only leader, nobody else is going to stay in the group because everybody else wants to be the leader too, right? So if they have the experience of how shared leadership works in different groups, then we can support them into building it into whatever they're creating. And then as new learning happens, right, then we support meetings with having the kind of structure that supports how to discuss issues that come up. So for example, 12-step meetings have a lot of ancillary supports. There's 12 steps, 12 traditions, 12 concepts of service. So they have support for the meeting and the individual at lots of different levels. And so one of the things that they have in their concepts is this thing called the minority opinion, where if the group is going to make a decision, then they have a discussion, they call for a vote, and then the vote happens, right? And if it's a meeting of 10 people and they want to change their meeting time, right? And 6 people vote one way and 4 people vote another way, the people that win are going to show up to the new meeting time and the people that lose are not, right? So there's a way to deal with that, which is the minority opinion. And that is that after the vote, somebody can call for a minority opinion and only the people that are in the minority get to share. And so they share more about why they want it to be the other way, which does a couple things. It allows for more insight, more reflection. It allows for them to feel like they have a greater, they get to have their say. And they can say things like, well, let's try it for 30 days and see how that works and then vote again. So it keeps people invested. And we, as kind of people that have experienced that, help meetings build that into their structure and into their formats. And so when we send out the structure of self-help support groups, which is kind of how to write a meeting format, we can build that in and support you in doing that with people you know. So thank you. Minority opinion is an AA exception. Yeah, absolutely, everybody.
Okay, everybody, it's 1:44. We've got 16 minutes before our next group is going to start. So you're welcome to stay. I'm going to stop the recording